What time does the 7 o'clock meeting start?
7 o'clock. Thank you, Sean, and welcome to all of our viewers around the world, particularly you folks in the UK, you people in Canada that have been reaching out to us. We want to wish you a Happy New Year. We want to celebrate with you. For those of you that celebrate these things, the year of the Jubilee, this new freedom that's coming to all of us around the world, the year of pilgrims of hope. And PON is a pilgrimage of hope, and we want to share that anointing with everybody within the sound of our voice. So we open every meeting of Position and Neutrality with a prayer, and Wayne's here tonight to do that.
Hello, everybody. How you doing? Heavenly Father, we invite you in tonight. Speak to us, Lord. Open our eyes that we may firmly make a decision for you. Lord, open our eyes that we may see just a little farther ahead the plan that you have for our lives. Thank you for resolution in our lives and all the people that we can go out and help. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Wayne. So tonight we're going to be looking at step 3. And for those of you who have never seen us, what we do here may be a little unique, but we take a look at the suggested instruction for a step or so a week directly out of this book. And we use this book in 12-step recovery. Why?
Because it works.
Yeah, the process described by the authors of this book has been proven to work for addicts of the hopeless variety, addicts to alcohol and other substances. So what we attempt to do here is try to carry this message, as the 12th step would suggest. They wrote this book to show others precisely how they recovered, and they left it as a legacy so that we could in turn show somebody else precisely how they recovered and how our experience aligns with theirs in order to be able to bring this news to them, right? Yeah. So those of you around the world understand that this is sometimes a bit of a history lesson, sometimes a bit of a biblical lesson. All of that is true because that's the formation, that's the nature, that's what this book represents. It's the testimony of the first 100. So tonight we're going to take a look at step 3. Huh? I held it up before. You want me to do it again? I got hecklers in the crowd, folks. The book we're talking about is Alcoholics Anonymous, the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. And they tell us in the foreword, we've already gone through that, but for those of you who don't know, they tell us who the we is. The we is the first 100 who have recovered. And so tonight we're taking a look at step 3. And oftentimes in fellowships, we get a little confused of what the decision is. So we want to take the mystery out of what the decision is. But basically all of chapter 5 that we're about to dive into, people from AA rooms are probably familiar with chapter 5 because we tend to read a portion of it at most AA meetings. Well, what the portion we read is the wrap-up of step 1 and 2, leading us to a 3rd step decision. So we're going to take the mystery out of what the decision is and what we've got to do in order to follow their path, which we're going to start with, right? So it says, it starts out with a promise and a condition. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. So I always like people to pay attention to the way they use the words. They use the words they mean the words they say. There's 100 people telling the story of thousands of people, but they talk about one path. Anyone think that's an accident? Nope. So there's a promise. People don't fail. Pretty rare. But there's one path. Yep. And they're going to lay out the process through which that path is discovered. Right. Make sense? And then it says, those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. So the first question probably would be, have you ever considered yourself a cannot or a will not? Did you find there wasn't much difference between the experience of either? We're trying to call an end to judgment here, because sometimes we think we're a will not until we find out we're a cannot. Because that's the nature of insanity. And then it says that if we'll give ourselves to this simple program, then this will avoid this outcome. But usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves cannot. So they must be out there. So we would want to identify what it is they're constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves about. Do we have any theories?
Yes, I have a theory.
Speak to us, Sean.
That they're incapable of believing that they are really an alcoholic.
Yes. And the thing is, there's no wrong answer here. They've talked to us very specifically about two experiences they want to call our attention to. So they want us to, let's go back and review the experiences, shall we, to come to the conclusion Sean's talking about. Let's go back to the doctor's opinion, and let's take a look in this instance for the bottom of page XXVIII, Roman numeral 28, if you're in the 4th edition, this printing. And if you're not, find this particular passage. It says, men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol.
Yes.
So if I've got people who have a propensity for consuming alcohol, if you're sitting here listening to me and you're sober tonight, give yourself permission to feel that sensation produced. And if you're honest with yourself, can you feel it? And are you sober now? So cunning, baffling, and powerful. It still tells me that's possible for me. That euphoria, that freedom is possible for me, even though I know the wreckage it will bring. Right? So they want us to own that, okay? And it says the sensation is so elusive that while they admit it injurious, they cannot, after a time, differentiate the true from the false. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. And then it says they are restless, irritable, and discontented unless they can again experience a sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks which they see others taking with impunity. So what the doctor is opining is these people will not be able to sustain abstinence because of that condition. If you can sit here sober many weeks, many years, that will lure you in eventually, and without it, you'll be restless, irritable, and discontent. So left to your own devices, willpower alone, unlikely that you'll have a fulfilling life. That's what he says. You all have to, within the sound of my voice, you have to make your decision. Have I had trouble just being abstinent? Right? And this would explain it. Okay, so then we want to go to the bottom of page 50 and see what the authors of the book discovered about this process and the power it reveals for a replacement for that conundrum. So it says here are thousands of men and women, page 50, bottom of the page, thousands of men and women worldly indeed. They flatly declare that since they have come to believe in a power greater than themselves, to take a certain attitude toward that power and to do certain simple things, there's been a revolutionary change in their way of living and thinking. So how many of you have needed such a revolution in the way you lived and thought at some time in your existence? There's a lot of people that I'm talking to tonight right here in the room that have decades of sobriety. And I think to a person, we would tell you, even in long-term sobriety, I need a revolution from time to time. So this is a manner of living, right? And so they're not proposing a temporary solution. They're proposing a complete solution that is progressive, just like my illness was. And then it says that a revolutionary change in their way of living and thinking in the face of collapse and despair, in the face of total failure of their human resources, they found that a new power, peace, happiness, and sense of direction flowed into them. Now, those of you that know the Spirit and know the sensory experience of the Spirit, give yourself permission to feel that. Introducing somebody to the power within them the first time when you take someone through their steps. Introducing somebody in worship to what's going on within them when they tell you they feel inebriated. Because what they propose is, since I have to be inebriated in order to enjoy my experience in the world, They propose spiritual inebriation to replace my synthetic inebriation. Does that make sense? And if we don't tell people that, we cheat them out of a meaningful life. So the authors are clear to tell us. It's my job to show you what I know about it. Does that make sense? No matter how uncomfortable that is, everyone wants to go preach to the Amen chorus, but sometimes we got to go to Nineveh for my biblical students. And it is my experience that everything's Nineveh. And those of you that are not biblical students, don't get your knickers in a twist. I'm just trying to be inclusive here. All right. So those are the two things I got to be honest about. I need a solution. I know it's possible because they told me where and how. Yes? And I know it's progressive because I look around and we've got a collective experience. Yes? All right. So we're back to what we got to be honest about. And we've decided that, yes, that sense of ease and comfort of the synthetic spirit calls to me, but I do not want to block consciousness of this fountain that I have found within me. And if you guys don't believe that's true, how many of you were drinkers? Any drinkers? Did we not skip meals because we did not want to wreck the buzz? We denied ourselves because we didn't want to wreck the buzz. So the same thing happens as we outgrow our human condition and empower the spirit. All right, so now we got to get back to where I was. I'm clearing into action. I'm going to skip a whole chapter now. All right, so our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, or what we're like now. Be careful. That's what the inventory is about. That's why I do a 4-step. See what I was like. I was selfish, dishonest, inconsiderate. I was full of guilt, shame, and remorse. I was in fear much of the time, but I didn't want you to know I was in fear, so I acted out in rage to back you off. That's what I was like. Then I encountered this power, and I'm not as much like that anymore. I still think like that from time to time, but I'm empowered to act better than that. What I was like, what happened, what I'm like now. Yes? And they know this by evidence because there we are trying to lift them up when no one's trying to lift them up. Why? Because someone was there to lift me up when no one was there to lift me up. Yeah? All right. So then it says, if you've decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. So they're telling us what readiness looks like and what we need to decide, because you need full information in order to make a conscious decision. You cannot move into a conscious relationship without consciously examining it with your logical senses, right? So this isn't about tricking people, no matter how many times you told them, you've introduced them to the power, you've called it to their attention, and now we're going to lay out the decision. And if we say something like, if you want what we have and you're willing to go to any length to get it, then we better take a look at what they have. Not what somebody that we've met since had, what they had. Yes? So go to page 25 in your book. And they say, middle of that page, the great fact is just this and nothing less. That's a pretty profound statement. It says that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences. And they've defined it for you in another section of the book later. But for our purposes, what we do know is that it is characterized by power, peace, happiness, and a sense of direction flowing in. So we're focusing on the experience of power within us. Make sense? And when someone's working with you, you may not feel. I was so dead in the spirit when my people grabbed me that I couldn't feel what they could feel happening in me. And they called it to my attention, and all I knew is that I was different coming out than I was going in. Anyway, so it says, which have revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward our fellows, and towards God's universe. Oh yeah, when we say God, they say, except for Trina, she sneezes. So the point that we're after here is they told us, we needed a revolution. We agreed we all needed a revolution. We need a revolution from time to time. And they're telling us the power within us is the revolution. Yes? And then it says, The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish those things for us, which we could never do by ourselves. Now that, for a bunch of believers, doesn't sound like all that profound a testimony. You hear it on every Sunday morning or Saturday night. But half of these people were atheists or agnostics. And to a person, they say they're absolutely certain. If I'm an addict of the hopeless variety and I'm an atheist or agnostic, one thing I absolutely have to have is certainty. You can't talk to me about hope because I've had hope and it fades. When I was in my active addiction, I was absolutely certain about exactly one thing. If I could get to the dope man, I could feel different. No matter how bad it was, I was absolutely certain of what that power could do for me. And that's why I need that kind of certainty. That's why I got to serve till I'm certain. Because I'm the guy that needs to be certain. And maybe I'm sitting in a room full of them. I suspect that's so. So, do you want it? Are you willing to go to any lengths to get it? Yep. And we're always easily overcommitted. But, you know, we're willing to read further and walk further, right? We're ready to go to certain lengths. But they're trying to get us to abandon ourselves completely through the process. All right. So then it goes on to say you're ready to take certain steps and then tell us right away, the minute you are ready, reticence will come. At some of these, we balked. I'm ready to have your result, but not do your work. That familiar? And it's not work any more than being honest about what's driving me. Quit comparing myself to those around me. Quit defining my existence by my circumstance. Take captive every thought and realize that I am not that thought. Does it make sense? And that this process is going to help us with that. So it says we thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. So why am I so earnest to beg you to be fearless and thorough from the very start? How many of you have had more than one start? How many of you have found it's really painful to have more than one start? How many of you have watched people who really cared about have more than one start? So I really don't want to have to watch that with you because I've grown to be somewhat fond of you, right? Okay, so some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. How many of you tried to walk in two worlds? I ain't changed. I just don't drink. Okay, well, that sounds like a hell of a plan, but if I didn't change, I drink. I mean, that's the one thing we can be sure about. But if you're trying to live the spiritual life, and that's not, so we gotta learn to question that, because they all do. To a person, we do. We try to hold on to our old ideas. How many of you learned that you didn't even know what your old ideas were until you started serving? When we start going out and trying to serve people, we have to confront our old ideas to be a faithful servant. Yep. All right, so remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling power. Without help, it's too much for us. But there is one who has all power. That one is? Power. That one is God. Power. May you find him now. Now, they wouldn't have said that had they not told us precisely where and how. Where do we find this power? And how do we find it? So they're setting up a decision to start taking the first step of action of searching and fearless moral inventory of me, because I need power now. Yes? Not because you need to know my story, not even at this point because I need to know my story, but because I've got to get proficient in telling my story with confidence, because that's my testimony. I come from a mess, I now have a message, and I need to get prepped. Yes? All right. So they said, may you find him when? Now. How many of you waited after you knew you could score some more whatever you were looking for? I have to wait a week because I'm kind of watching the show. We got to go power seeking now because that's our nature, yeah? And then it says half measured availed us nothing. Well, that would tell us what? To a person, we've all tried half measures. And sometimes it seems like it's availing us about half, doesn't it? But remember, we don't really know if we're a cannot or a will not. All right. So then it tells us we ask his protection and care with complete abandon. They're certain about the power they've discovered, and the abandon probably comes from the wreckage they're trying to be extracted from. That'd be my guess. That was me. I don't know that I described it as complete abandon at the time, but I can see how it would be described as complete abandon now. I had no idea what this life would look like. I wouldn't trade it, but I don't think I'd have wanted to know what it was going to look like either. Just so you know. So, complete abandon. Here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. For those of you who have unfortunately been misled that our program is about meetings, no, that's our fellowship. They didn't say, here's our meeting list, right? Here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. You're not in the program unless you're in the manner of living, right? And then you may be in any number of fellowships that have all their own stuff, but all 12-step fellowships are based on this experience. So even if you identify somewhere else, you might want to tie into the experience of these men and women. All right. I'm not going to read all the steps because that'll just freak people out. Let's go over to page 60. And it says, many of us exclaimed, what an order, I can't go through with it. So how many of you maybe didn't say that, but most definitely felt that? Yeah, and so oftentimes in our fellowships, we get funny and we're feeling better and we say things like, bullshit. But the authors are less full of bravado and they say, do not be discouraged, because they know the new man, he's not feeling like he fits anywhere right now. So what we definitely want to be is different. We want to say, hey, look, I know you're afraid, dude. I can feel you from here. But let me tell you, I once thought and felt as you do. But I don't think I'd have made the progress I've made had I not taken action. And here's the action I took, and here's what I experienced as a result. My life does not resemble in any fashion what it did then, and I did not ask on that day for anywhere near what I have been given. In spite of the troubles I have had to walk through to get here. All right. So then it says, do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We're not looking for perfection. We're looking for effort. And not because I say so, because I value you and I want you to value you. Does it make sense? We got to pour into them. We got to see them like God sees them, because they can't right now. We're not saints. The point is that we're willing to grow along spiritual lines. So are you willing to grow along spiritual lines given the new information? If you're just listening to this somewhere and you're going, I don't know about the spiritual stuff, dude, there is nothing that is not spiritual. There's only asleep and awake. That's just the facts. And as you grow, you'll figure that out. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Why would I want to be perfect? What is my purpose once I'm full? I need to be half empty all the time. Otherwise, what am I, you know what I mean? I'm not pouring enough. Nothing more can come in. All right, so our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear three pertinent ideas. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. Notice how they separated those two. My alcoholism created such disarray in my life and the lives of others, I thought the unmanageable they were talking about was my circumstance. Anyone else? And indeed, my circumstances got better when I stopped twisting off all the time. But my alcoholism was not effect, or rather cause, it was effect. Right? My life was unmanageable, therefore I drank. And other things. And so if I don't know that, see, the first step of faith I made was I made the admission in 1 before they showed me the truth of it in 2. They already had me working in faith, admitting to the unmanageability until they pointed to me what the unmanageability was. And by 4 and 5, I'm actually examining the unmanageability, the war within that I've been in the middle of. Is it B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism? See, they're not asking us to be certain. They're just probably. You might be able to will it away. Try that with diarrhea. That's always a good test. It might work. Most of you giggle because most of you probably tried. It's better to believe it's coming. But, to each their own. And then see that God could and would if he were saw it. So that power could and would if he were saw it. And they've told me where I'm going looking, right? So it's getting to be pretty simple. You're starting to see the decision laid out. Clearly, it's about taking the rest of the steps. They're going, the decision is simply take the rest of the steps. It's never about the prayer. The prayer is going to be personal to you. You get the idea sometimes, it's all about the prayer. You got to memorize the prayer. You got to say, look, memorize the prayer, but if it doesn't mean anything to you, it doesn't mean anything to the power within you. Right? All right, so being convinced, we're at step 3. So being convinced to what? A, B, and C. And how many of you have to admit you were not convinced on the day you first made a decision, but you went ahead and made the decision because your options didn't look any better? Right? So God does not make too hard terms on those who earnestly seek. He gave you the benefit before you put in the output. That's what grace looks like for those of you who have not been introduced to the idea of grace. You get the benefit and the fruit of the Spirit before you acknowledge the Spirit. Pretty cool, right? All right, so which is that we decided to turn our will and our life over to God as we understood him. Now, over the years, people have just said this is a God of my understanding, and you can say that if you want, but that's not what they said. And they said, as we understood him, and then went to very clear examples of the power, peace, happiness, Bill's cool wind of a mountaintop blowing through and through, his time in the graveyard. It made him swallow hard. It was movements of the Spirit within, focusing us on the Spirit within. So what they understood is the theologies and all those things that had failed them was attainable by simply acknowledging the power that animates me. And then seeking a relationship with that power. Does that make sense? Yeah. And then it says, what do we mean by that and what do we do? Well, that would be the question, because especially if half of them are atheists or agnostics, because they're going to be sensitive to all this stuff. This is why it's always a demonstration. Why do you think they talked about the electrical theory? They didn't expect you to believe in electrical theory or even be able to fully define or comprehend it. They said, just look at the effects produced. Focus on the effects. Yes? All right, so the first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. So, what is the process of me being convinced? I haven't started it yet, right? The up to now, I thought my life run on self-will was going to turn out better than it did. Yes? And then I ended up in a train wreck. So now I've been introduced to a different manner of living, and I'm still, just because I get, the freedom immediately, I still got to have to walk it out till my mind catches up. Does that make sense? That's why when you go to the rooms and you hear all these people saying little chants like keep coming back and everyone gets mad at us, dude, you're not going to get it on the first day. You're not going to get it on the first person you help. You're going to have to keep, ask, seek, knock, for those of you who are more biblical. On that basis, we're almost always in collision with something or somebody, even though our motives are good. How many of you had really good motives, still couldn't stay out of conundrums? Right? All right, so each person is like an actor who wants to run the whole show. He's forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballet, the scenery, and the rest of the players in his own way. If his arrangements would only stay put, If only people would do as he wished, the show would be great. How many of you have thought that? If all these people would just do it like I told them. How many of you got so fed up with people you isolated away from all people? Did you still have trouble arranging the show? Because the main problem center is in the mind, right? All right, so everybody, including himself, would be pleased. Life would be wonderful. In trying to make these arrangements, our actor may sometimes be quite virtuous. He may be kind, considerate, patient, generous, even modest and self-sacrificing. Sean usually says thank you, but he's fallen asleep. It's our advanced age. So I encourage people when they talk about being virtuous, kind, considerate, patient, generous, even modest and self-sacrificing, to find yourself there, even if it's uncomfortable, right? And then we're going to talk about something else about the human condition. Yeah. On the other hand, he may be mean, egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. Yeah. But as with most humans, he's more likely to have varied traits. So if you're more comfortable in one camp than another, that's why you're going to do an inventory. That's why you're going to serve. We're going to empower the spirit, so you're more of the former and less of the latter. And then you're going to remember that all humans are going to at some times be the latter, and they don't need my judgment, right? Because we're about ready to go out and try and deliver humans from humanity. Not an easy task. It's going to probably require power, right? All right, so what usually happens?
Well, that's two.
Wayne says there was some calamity. Yeah. So it says the show doesn't come off very well. He begins to think life doesn't treat him right. He decides to exert himself more. He becomes on the next occasion still more demanding or gracious, as the case may be, and still the play does not suit him. How many of you have felt that? You knew how you were thinking wasn't serving you. You knew how you were feeling wasn't serving you. You were powerless to come out of that loop. Remember in 2, they told us this power could philosophically comfort us. So it's a whole game changer to know where to seek peace if I'm this guy and we're all this guy. Yeah? So admitting he may be somewhat at fault, he's sure that other people are more to blame. Any of you had that experience? Did it help to know they were more the blame? How many of you have discovered there really is no joy in winning these petty things? We think it's going to bring joy. We'll fight to the end. We'll lose every friend we got to win that argument. There ain't no joy, right? All right. So then it says, he becomes on the next occasion still more demanding or gracious, as the case that may be, and still the play does not suit him. Admitting he may be somewhat at fault, he's sure that other people are more to blame. He becomes angry, indignant, self-pitying. You see that cause and effect?
Yeah.
When I don't take ownership of it, I'm going to get worse. I'm going to go flesh.
Manipulate.
I got to, yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
What is his basic trouble?
Yeah.
A lot of us don't know, but that's why we're going to do an inventory. We're going to find out, right? Instead of you telling me what my trouble is, because we all want to do that. Everybody wants to have all the answers. I don't know how many people I've worked with, and they just tell me what to do. Well, the answers for you are in you. Tell me what you want to do. I can't do that. I don't know nothing. Tell me. No, it's not how it works. I don't know nothing about you. I don't know anything about what you'll do. You tell me what you're willing to do. I'll see if I can support you in it. And if I can't, we can part friends. It's that simple, right? And have you ever tried to get somebody to do something you told them to do they didn't want to do? Even if they wouldn't admit to you they didn't want to do it? Did you notice that they didn't do it without telling you? And if you paid attention, you'd figure out that I ain't going to do it. And have you ever been told to do something and just didn't do it and waited for them to figure it out? That's kind of how we are. We're a bit obstinate. All right. So it says, what is his basic trouble? Is he not really a self-seeker even when trying to be kind? Is your kindness transactional? Yeah, likelihood is some percentage of time it is. And I don't even know it until I'm unhappy with the way they respond. Is he not a victim of the delusion that he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if only he manages well? So now those are powerful words, guys. I can't do anything about my own delusion because I don't know what's there. That means I lie to me. I don't know I'm lying. So people who think they're smashing their own delusions are delusional. But what smashes our delusions is a very powerful, different experience than what we thought. And so like I had the delusion that I was better than certain people. And then I interacted with those people and they made me better. Many of us have that experience. Is he not evident to all the rest of the players that these are the things he wants? Did any of you ever run around pretending like you were in charge and somebody found out you weren't? And do not his actions make each of them wish to retaliate, snatching all they can get out of the show? Sometimes we get in business dealings where everybody decides to grind everybody under their heels. And they're very unfortunate and they're very useless and they're very common in the human world. And one of the things we cannot allow ourselves to be is captive to that nonsense because the Spirit delivers us through all things. Couldn't happen. Take every moment as I choose it. If it wasn't for promoting me, it couldn't happen to me. And people that want to mess with you, make sure they know you know that. There's power in that testimony. Every moment is a moment I choose because he said so. Is he not even in the best moments a producer of confusion rather than harmony? How many of you have tried that? How many are going to calm the whole problem? And by the time you were about halfway through, you had a bigger mess than when you started. It says our actor is self-centered, egocentric, as people like to call it nowadays. He's like the retired businessman who lolls in the Florida sunshine in the winter, complaining of the sad state of the nation. The minister who sighs over the sins of the 20th century. Politicians and reformers who are sure all would be utopia if the rest of the world would only behave. Outlaws, safecrackers who think society has wronged him, and the alcoholic who has lost all and is locked up. Whatever our protestations, are not most of us concerned with ourselves, our resentments, or our self-pity? Now, it's so important to discover that that manifestation of self is what has me in bondage, not the way you treated me. And it's not good enough for me to tell you that's true. I have to tell you how I discovered that about me. Right? Regardless of what you've done it for my benefit. And I probably, they told us we invariably find that at some time in the past, we've made decisions based on self, which later placed us in a position to be hurt. Every business decision I ever made, I made to do better for me. And I got in bed with some people that didn't have the same interest and then was pissed off at the outcome. I invariably find that at some time in the past, I made a decision based on self, which later placed me in a position to be hurt. Feel me? So selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our trouble. Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity, we step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt us seemingly without provocation, but we invariably find that at some time in the past, we've made decisions based on self, which later placed us in a position to be hurt. Guys, I'm just telling you, in the manner of living, we can't hang on to restlessness, irritability, and discontent. Resentment's the number one offender. I don't care how nasty you've been to me. I got to find a way to own it. Seek the guidance of the Father why that happened. If I survived it, it's a testimony. Something good's coming from it. And I'm not talking to you of theories, folks. I'm telling you about what I'm walking through in this very day in my life. So our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making because of my transactional interaction with the world. Right? Yep. There's a book out there that says, do not love the world or anything in it. And it seems like a conflict because he said, for he so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. Now, how can two be true? Because when I love something more than the creator, when I love the created more than the creator, I get into conflict. And so, not trying to preach, but I always preach a little. So anyway, they arise out of ourselves, and the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. So they already told us what? Most people, they're regular examples of self-will run riot. I have found out I'm special. I'm an extreme example of self-will run riot, and I don't think so. What are my chances? Given that I've determined that that is the root of my trouble. I don't have any chance, right? Not without this salvation they're talking about. So it says, above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness. The world will not shed its selfishness. I won't even shed my selfishness. I have to act unselfishly until it's ripped from me. Does that make sense? It's literally learning that it's more blessed to give than to receive, and actually putting it into practice and realize how the change comes over us. We must, or it kills us. And God makes that possible. Now, I like to point out to people that don't understand biblical teaching, because there are many, it doesn't say God does it. We're not sitting in a closet praying for a pizza. It says he makes it possible. I'm still going to have to take the actions indicated. I'm going to have to align my actions with an intention to grow along spiritual lines. Yes? We're in partnership here, hands and feet, spearheads, right? All right, so, and there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without his aid. What does that imply? That they tried, right? Oh, you got this addiction thing handled. I'll take care of all the job stuff. Don't you worry about that. I found the perfect one. I found the perfect girl, too. Don't worry about the one I left at home. None of y'all thought you had the rest of the world by the... Yeah. Okay. So, I don't want to go down that road. So then it says this is the how and the why of it. First of all, we had to quit playing God. See, I was never supposed to arrange the lights, the scenery, and the ballet. And the reason the play didn't suit me when I got everything set is I was out setting it, and the lights panned to me for me to play the role that was my life, and I wasn't there. I was too busy doing something else. And so it says it didn't work. So to a person, that's why we end up here, because what we were doing didn't work, right? And then it said, next, we decided that hereinafter in this drama of life, God was going to be our director. So what's a director do? Directs. He arranges the lights, the scenery, and the ballet, and he directs other people to do it. Yes? Because he's not doing it himself. He's hollering in a horn or whatever the heck that thing is. He is the principal and we're his agents. You understand the nature of agency? You understand the pilgrims of hope that we are called to be as an agency. We're distributors. Not a moniker on a t-shirt, a kind hand and a smile. Yeah? So he's the father and we're his children. Most good ideas are simple, and this concept was the keystone of the new and triumphant arch through which we pass to freedom. So what concept? Yeah, there's one director. Yes? Okay. So when we sincerely took such a position, all sorts of remarkable things followed. So those of you more biblical, signs and wonders follow us. If you haven't started serving in this manner of living, you may not know that, but if you have started serving this manner of living, it's obvious the impossible happens around us every day. In fact, I'm a walking example of the impossible myself. We had a new employer. And being all powerful, he provided what we needed if we kept close to him and performed his work well. Now, the mystery of that when we first start seeing it is that we really don't know what that means. But as we grow in this, we stay close by staying connected to the power within us. We submit our thoughts to this power within us. We ask this power within us to empower us through our circumstance. And we believe for the outcome that we're promised, not the circumstance in which we find ourselves. Yes? And it's just a manner of living. It's the only way you can pour into the kinds of people we are, because the kinds of people we are, a lot of really learned people have poured lots of resources into us and it didn't work. But a peer, an alcoholic talking to another alcoholic, a convict talking to another convict, they can win their confidence in a few hours. And once that accommodation is reached, miracles, signs and wonders. Yep. All right. So established on such a footing. So what's the footing?
Of faith.
Yep, right there. He's in charge, right? This is the footing. I'm standing square on the rock. Yep. So established on such a footing, we became less and less interested in ourselves. If they just told me that selfishness, self-centeredness was at the root of my troubles, then progressively losing that condition through practice would be a progressive solution to a progressive illness, wouldn't it? And I point that out because it's such a logical approach. So people that can't buy anything spiritual without a logical mind examining it, it is perfectly logical to believe in power I've experienced. That's why I believe in electricity. Because as Sean eloquently often says, I've been shocked.
Yeah. Shit shocked.
Yes. So, and then it says we become less and less interested in ourselves, our little plans and designs. How many of you have been around, whether it's months, years, decades, and have discovered that what I thought was the plan and design has manifested greatly from anything I could see or imagine? More and more, we became interested in seeing what we could contribute to life. Isn't that interesting how that happened in us? How many of you really came from a life where you sought to see what you could get out of it at every moment? And matter of fact, it was a survival skill. And all of a sudden to not be that person and not have done anything particular, I mean, that wasn't what I asked for. Then they're going to talk about the experience again. They always focus on the experience, right? The one symptom we have in common with every alcoholic that we may have many similarities, but there's one symptom, the inability to control it, that phenomenon of craving, right? So it's all about the experience of power and that draw outward, and now there's a draw inward. And they're going to talk to us about it. As we felt new power flow in. And we got to call to people's attention. Guys, we're not talking to you about concepts here. We're talking about the great reality found within you. And then it says, as we enjoyed peace of mind. How many of you don't even know what peace of mind is, and then all of a sudden one day get a glimpse of it? And then we realize there's a potential for expansive periods of time where we can live somewhat out of conflict, even in conflict. Yes? Then it says, as we discovered we could face life successfully. What do you think the amends steps for? If I'm going to go forward and become who I want to become and who I always wanted to become, I got to go make right to all the people I tried to harm to get me up the next rung of the ladder so I don't have people trying to pull me back down as I grow. And in the process of owning who I've been and how I've treated people, I grow in spiritual consciousness so I can go out to the really, truly hopeless and pull them out. So 9 is my fitness step for my life of service, which is the big amends. But it all starts with here, learning I could face life successfully. Because it's not about me telling you I face life successfully. It's you seeing the evidence of it in and on my life. You don't care what I have to say if you don't know what's been done for me. Right? You don't care what I have to say until you know how much I care about you. Because that's how we are. Yeah? All right. So as we became conscious of his presence. Now listen to this. Half of them are atheists or agnostics. They're aware that this power, peace, happiness, and sense of direction is flowing in and on them. And in fact, what we learned is not only is it on it, it's a homing beacon to those people that he would help of thy power, right? He walks us to people we've never met, and we can feel the signature of the Spirit on them. We know, yep, you got a healing coming. You're going to reveal my old ideas. You're going to get me some healing I'm needing. And by the way, you don't pick up your mat and walk. I'm going to show you something. Yeah. All right. So as we began to lose our fear today, tomorrow, the hereafter, we were reborn. So here we are early in the year. It is a Jubilee year. We were even playing a shofar here earlier for my Jewish friends because we thought it was important that we give it a blast, and we had Sierra here who could. But we're a new creation. He said, behold, I'm doing a new thing. Can you not perceive it? Everyone in the room, do you feel that? Yeah, it's still true. To this day, that's still true. You are not who you've been. You've been made new. Everyone in the sound of my voice, you're not who you've been. You've been made new. Let's walk it out together. Then it says, we're now at step 3. They said that a long time ago, didn't they? Is it alcoholics that have a tendency to ramble, or do I just have a short attention span? I mean, I know we were here not too long ago. So they said, many of us said to our Maker as we understood him, God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help with thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. Don't make the mistake of putting an amen there. They did on purpose not put an amen there because I don't know enough of the story to get a commitment. My eyes aren't opened yet. I've just agreed to go look, right? And if you do not speak in King James language, is anyone in here besides Sean speaking King James language? Okay. For those of you who do speak in King James language, feel free to use this precise language. But if this makes you uncomfortable, write your own. The power in you knows how you talk. You want to express the idea. Let's show you how they tell you that. We thought well before taking this step, making sure we were ready, that we could at last abandon ourselves utterly to him. Notice how they just defined complete abandon. First the prayer, then the action. If the action doesn't follow the prayer, I didn't mean the prayer, I didn't understand the decision. So we can re-explain it, right? All right, so we found it very desirable to take this spiritual step with an understanding person. So some people feel uncomfortable, and so they want to have somebody that kind of knows what's up to do it with them. And that's not the end of the world, but it's not necessary, right? And then it tells us some examples such as our wife, best friend, or spiritual advisor. But here's a caution. It's better to meet God alone than with someone who might misunderstand. We're not telling you that your spiritual advisor doesn't understand, but if they do not understand the decision you're making, then it would be better to not have the encounter with them. It'll dampen the effect. Okay? And then they go on to tell us the wording was, of course, quite optional. So usually with my folks, I have them write their own because I want to see that they're making some effort. Write your own, bring it to me, or read it to me over the phone. If you meant it, I'll feel you, and we'll be ready to go. And if you didn't mean it, and it doesn't mean anything to you, we probably won't be talking much longer. How do I know? Because I've done this before, right? I mean, it's not that I won't talk to you. You'll run and hide. That's what they do. All right. So it says, so long as we express the idea, voicing it without reservation. Why without reservation? Because of what they already told you they learned. The first step in recovery they learned was they had to fully concede to their innermost selves. And I can't do that based on a lie. I can lie to everyone in the world, but I cannot get any results by lying to me other than the terrible results I've been getting. Does it make sense? Yep. So then it says, this was only a beginning, though if honestly and humbly made, an effect, sometimes a very great one, was felt at once. So I always like to talk to people about effects. We've talked a lot about effects, but I took a guy through the steps one time years ago. He had been in and out of AA rooms for 10 years. And I met him at a meeting, one of those noon meetings where everyone's about half tore up anyway. And he was, coming back from a sick one. And so I said, yeah, man, I'll be happy to sit down with you. And I took him through 1, 2, 3, got him to this point and said, hey, give me a holler, let me know later. But what kind of effect you had, just tell me. And I pointed out some of the author's effects. So nothing, he goes and does his own thing. And I'm sitting at home and I get this phone call from this cat. And he goes, He says, I went down, I wrote that prayer, I did all that, and I didn't feel nothing. But I do have my inventory ready. And I'd like to go over it with you tomorrow. And I looked at him and I said, well, on the phone, but I'm looking at the phone thinking, dude, some people would consider an inventory after 10 years an effect. I think there's hope for you, brother. So we're there, folks. Happy New Year. See you next week.